Hey friends, my name is Roger Reinert, and I'm your host today for Good Talk. You know, one of the things that I absolutely love about calling Duluth home is that we are a big small town. And there are all sorts of things that happen all around us every day that we know something about, but we don't know a lot about. And so the goal of our podcast is to delve more deeply into those topics. The services, the people, the events, the activities that make this such an amazing place to live, work, and call home. So thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to a great conversation, and we'll dive right into the next one. Well, thanks everyone for joining us again for another edition of Good Talk. I have the great pleasure today of chatting with a longtime friend of mine, Ryan Kern. Ryan is the founder and president of the Duluth Airshow, amongst many other events under the Kern umbrella. But today I really want to talk about the Duluth Airshow because it's one of our region's biggest events and coming up in a few weeks. So wanted to start, Ryan, just by talking about where did you and the air show come from? I mean, it's how I first met you. I remember getting a random email about helping out with the air show, and I love flying, and so I'm like, oh, this sounds like a blast. And 20 some years later, I still have a connection to you and the show. But what was that inception story? What was the origin story of the Duluth Air Show?
Well, it's things in life, right, kind of happen for a reason.
Yeah.
And sometimes sometimes you fall into something, but sometimes you have a passion for something. And you always wonder, I'm like, man, that would be so much fun to be involved in. Maybe you see an event that you're like, that would be a really cool event to be a part of. And fortunately for us, we had started Kern & Company back in 1996 or 1997, depending on who you ask, right? You ask me, I'm going to say it's 96.
Are you the one to ask?
I am the one to ask. But if you ask my wife, she's like, no, 1997 is when you started. So we have a difference of opinion, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So we just celebrated 25 years this year.
Right.
We had our 25-year celebration, so that was really cool.
Yeah.
But really, what kind of how it all came to be is very similar to you, right? I mean, I had, growing up as a kid, I was an aviation enthusiast. My grandfather was in World War II. He
Right.
flew with a B-24 bomber.
Right.
My dad worked up at the 148th Fighter Wing growing up. And so I was really surrounded, by my grandfather, who was in the Army Air Force, and then my dad at the 148th. And so when I was a kid growing up in Duluth in the 80s, actually had a couple air shows.
Yeah.
They had an air show that I recall in 1985, 1987, and 1989 were the three that I vividly remember as a child going to, and I was inspired. I mean, I was really inspired. And those shows were put on by what was then the Duluth Convention and Visitors Bureau, which
Sure.
was later, Visit
Duluth,
Duluth, and
sure.
right. So, and I remember having a conversation. I'm not even answering your question yet because I'm still working
It's all right,
backwards.
I got you.
I'm still working backwards.
But I already have a follow-up. So.
Yeah. So, and I remember having a conversation with Terry Matson at the time, who was at Visit Duluth,
Sure.
and I had asked Terry. This is hindsight reflecting, and he had told me that it was actually the Convention and Visitors Bureau that put on the air shows as a way to draw tourism to Duluth, as a way to put bodies in hotels,
Mm-hmm.
and as a way of generating the tax base or increasing the tax base by getting people into restaurants and so on and so forth. It was not designed to make money, right? It was a way to spend the money to get people into the community, to generate revenues in taxes. And so I remember Terry telling me one time, high risk, low reward. And so that was like my first foray into the air show world, and I started to think about it. I'm like, well, this is really cool, but it's not. I mean, that's a massive risk, and
Right.
I don't have that kind of money, so I can't do that.
So my recollection too at that time is, or when you brought it back and being a part of a group that was thinking about the educational activities, and you can talk a little bit about this, there was always an intent to be more than just planes, more than just things in the sky. But I'll be honest, there were some people that sat at a table and like, this is never going to work. They pointed to the one that had a Concorde that was a bust, and somebody had lost a lot of money. It was just a very negative attitude, high risk, and and I'm there all bright and shiny, going, well, of course. And I think one of the genius things you did was get a bunch of people together who hadn't done it before, because you didn't have in your head that this isn't going to work.
Well, and so I can segue. This is a great segue. So thank you for sharing that. So when we decided, or I should say when I decided that I was going to do the first air show, it was really because Kern and Company, when we started, we were doing events, but we didn't have a signature event. And I think at that point, when I was calling businesses to actually ask them to be a sponsor or be a partner with us on some of these events, that every time they would pick up the phone, they would be like, "And you are who? What have you done?" And so that was really hard. And so I had an epiphany one night. I'm like, I should just go for it, because if I can, get myself out there and we can establish an air show, I mean, that maybe will help everything else that we're doing.
Yeah.
Because if we can do it and do it successfully, and I was 100% committed. I mean, I was not going to let it fail.
Yeah.
It was going to be a full-time job for me and then some.
Yeah.
And that's really
personally, like financially, all in.
All of
right?
it. All of it. And so, and which is great that you mentioned what you said, because the reality was that everybody that I had talked to that had been involved in previous shows were basically saying, don't do it. You're going to lose so much money. It has never worked. Here we go. It has never worked before. What makes you think, as a young 24-year-old, 24 years old, that you can make it work when all these other people, leaders in our community, have not made it work?
Yeah.
So being naive was helpful,
right,
in that particular time. And it's the old saying, right? Somebody tells you can't do it, you get motivated to prove everybody wrong.
Yeah.
And so
there's also something about being 24.
Right. No, yeah. 24. Right.
You haven't had those life experiences that make you go, oh.
Right. Hadn't had that yet. And so, right. No, I wasn't married. I had no kids. I mean, and so for me, it's like, well, the only risk that I'm taking is myself.
Right.
I had already purchased my first home, and so I felt like I was in a really good spot, not realizing that soon thereafter, once we had, because we had applied for the U.S. Navy Blue Angels and for the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds starting in 1999. So I had actually started the process in 99. We're told no 3 times. So 99 we're told no, 2000 2 times. 99 we're told no, 2000 we were told no, and then
the first show was 2001.
And the U.S. Navy Blue Angels said, yeah, we'd love to come to Duluth. And this is December of 2020, right? I'm sure you remember this whole thing. And they were like, we'll be there in 8 months. 8 months? 8 months.
Get going.
I know, you better go. And so,
and by the way, don't fail, right?
Yes,
which everyone expects you to do.
So I would say I was very lucky. I had a supporter, and one of the supporters we actually had 2 really, really key supporters at the time. One of them was our mutual friend, Ray Klosowski. Ray Klosowski had just been hired at the Duluth Airport Authority. He had retired from, obviously, he moved from the 148th down to the state staff as a brigadier general, then retired and came back and worked at the airport. And I had known Ray since I was a kid because I was good friends with his son Brett, and so I think there was some familiarity already. Yeah. And I remember talking with Ray and really having or as we like to call him, General, but but right, we know better. But really having the conversation, and then he took a risk, and he was like, I'm gonna support this. I think you can do it. And he said, if there's any help that I can be, I will help support it. But because we're a city-owned entity, you are financially liable, right, for the air show, because the previous air shows that we talked about lost money, and then bills were not paid.
Sure.
And we can't take that risk. So if you're going to assume this, you are going to be personally and financially liable for this. And what that really meant for me in 2001 was, I had to mortgage my home.
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
And I remember all of the funding, anything that I had. Not only that, but borrowed money from my parents, and so I was really financially at risk. And at that point, once you've laid out everything that you possibly have, you don't fail. I mean, you can't fail at that point. Your body, your mind, you're like a bulldog. You just can't let go of it. And we were very fortunate that it worked out.
Now, I mean, let's dig a little deeper. Fortune sort of has a connotation of like luck, or I mean, what do you think really took something that everyone said can't be done to a really successful event out of the gate?
Well, I think when we talk about it, it's really about people, right? And I think what you try to do is you surround yourself. And I didn't know everything, right? So I knew marketing. I had a passion for the performers, right? And building the show. But I did not have expertise in parking. I did not have a whole series of expertise.
Concession,
right? I mean, logistics.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many things. It was such on a massive scale that I realized early on I can't do this by myself. And so that was a case of, at that point, really trying to find people to plug into those roles that I had heard through the community. Well, this person's really good at that. If you can get them, that might lead into this person. And so we really built our board that way in trying to find out, who are these leaders in our community that have not been involved before. So we're all learning together. But the other key in that whole thing, too, is I spent time educating. So what I think one of the biggest things that I did personally was when I had the concept in 1999, I actually went to the International Council of Air Shows. I mean, we joined ICAS. I took every possible class, every possible course, for a period of 3 years, learning. I took the operations course. I took the logistics course. So I was learning while we were applying. And so I was building a pretty solid knowledge base, but also making some really good contacts.
Right.
And so I was seeing how other air shows were doing it. I was seeing the ones that were successful, what they were doing different from maybe the ones that weren't as successful.
Yeah.
And that really was kind of a model. It's you have to trust people, bring people in, and then stay out of their way, right? That's the key. And so if somebody's extremely,
but yes, stay in charge.
You do,
right?
But you got to manage it, and you got to manage people.
Yeah.
But the key takeaway I've always said is you're working with volunteers.
Yep.
So you cannot. They're not employees.
Yeah.
And so when somebody agrees to do something, you have to trust them.
Yeah.
And give them the flexibility to do what they do, and really just kind of guide where you want to go, but then let them figure out how to get there because they're the expert.
Right. So when you think about, there's a couple things that I wanted to touch on that you just chatted about. I mean, one is just I think of having been involved in that 2001 show, I still have lifetime friends that came out of that board. And you'll hear people talk about the Duluth Airshow board. I've got a polo that says board member on it. Folks, most boards, you kind of sit and maybe vote on a few. That is not the Airshow board.
No,
if you want to get your hands dirty, you join this board.
Yeah.
It is a working board.
Right, and that's the key. Is we're not a governance anything.
Yeah.
We are
It's
working.
function.
It's a functional working board. Everybody on that, on our leadership team is now what we call ourselves, a leadership team. Everybody has a role. They are in charge of that area.
Right.
And they
for many years I did education,
Yep.
and then I moved into more of the public affairs and PR.
Right, and the same would be applying for you, right? So when you were doing education, right, we let you pick your team, and you picked your team,
Right.
and that was your team that you worked with. And then the same thing when I'll say we gave you a promotion, right? When you took on the other job, right? It was the same sort of a thing. Is okay, we're going to allow Roger to handle this big, huge chunk of real estate here, and then stay out of your way.
Yeah.
We're going to let you do your job and get you the resources that you need.
Same in other areas too, right? I mean, you have somebody who is kind of the head of transportation, sanitation, concessions, lodging. How many folks might be curious to know, how many rooms do you need to have, not for people that are coming to the show and staying, but for the performers?
That is a great question. We were just talking about.
It's not insignificant.
It's not. Jim Paquette, who's the hospitality director, just sent us the latest matrix yesterday. And I know that Jim had said we're capped right now. And so we're short, right? We're still a little short. And so, I think again, I didn't look at the bottom. It is a lot. I mean, we're talking, 1,000+ room nights.
Yeah.
And that's not for the public.
Right.
That's just us to do the show, right?
In,
just to accommodate.
In July in Duluth. When hotel rooms are already at a premium.
Here's a great example. So let's just take the U.S. Navy Blue Angels, who are going to be here this year.
Yeah.
Right. So they themselves, right? They've got 40. I think let's just say they've got 50 rooms per night. Well, they're here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Right.
So then all of a sudden you're talking to them alone. You're like, well, gee, that's 400 room nights
Right.
just for the Blue Angels, and they are not in our matrix.
Yeah.
We've already blocked them out. So Jim doesn't have to assign their rooms because they're already set, and then we have them work directly because they're government, right? They work directly with the hotel.
Yeah.
But then we have to do our own block of another 1,000. So
Yeah.
we're north. 1,500 room nights might be
Yeah.
realistic in terms of what we're using
Right.
for the Duluth Airshow.
Right. I want to come back to talking about a working board. I used to always joke, so folks may not remember. For a long time, the air show was every other year, and I used to always say that's so we have a year to forget how much work it is.
Right.
And then it moved to every year. Just talk a little bit about what drove that change and
Sure.
kind of where the air show sits vis-a-vis other large events. In a community that's known for large events.
Right. So I'm going to say this is a twofold. First and foremost, I mean, my hat's off to Tom Warner at the Duluth Airport, and Tom is a great executive director. I would say that Tom also has vision in terms of what the airport should be used for. Yes, it's great for commercial traffic, and you've got tenants there that are aviation specific tenants. But when you have an air show that's coming in, the amount of we're no longer at this point. You're no longer local. You're no longer regional. You have now a nationally recognized air show at your airport. That is huge. I mean, the amount of marketing and branding we do for the air show at the Duluth International
Sure.
Airport
Right.
is substantial, and
Right.
and it's not statewide. It's national. And so, Tom was, I remember having the conversation with Tom and saying, hey, we would like to move to a yearly model. And part of the reason we needed to move to a yearly model is that we were finding that doing the air show every other year, or maybe every two, there was a couple of years where we had a 2-year gap versus
Yep.
a 1-year gap.
During some reconstruction at the airport.
Right,
Yep.
right. And so the issue became that when you go to your partners or sponsors and you say, hey, we have a major event coming into our community, the largest aviation event in all of Minnesota, the largest spectator event north of Minneapolis, St. Paul, sponsors would say, well, look, when you're every year, we can budget the year before
Sure.
to cover you.
Sure.
But when you're every other year, we have now given away your money to another entity.
Sure.
And therefore, we don't have.
And now they're depending on it, and you're back.
Right. And so now, what we were doing is we were taking a step forward only to take a step back.
Sure.
And it became very difficult. And so what we found was that some of our sponsors were kind of we would add 2, lose 3, add
Yeah.
2, and so we were always fluctuating.
Yeah.
And so the model really needed to be to allow people to budget, and for our board members and our leadership team, if you know that the air shows every year, right, you can plan for that because
Sure.
we're relying a lot on our team
Yeah.
to say, hey. But when you're not having an air show, you would think it's just the opposite, right? You would
Right.
say, well, there's no air show next year. Go do your family, whatever you're going to do.
Right.
Well, then, parents commit with their kids to do other things. And then pretty soon we were also, losing a couple team members that
Sure.
I felt were integral to the success of the show because it was planning,
Right.
and when you're not into that routine,
Right.
you not only lose revenue, but you also lose members and people.
And your institutional knowledge and
Yes.
that core volunteer base. Was there also a piece of the, I think folks think, well, it's got to be the Thunderbirds, or it's got to be the Blue Angels, like there has to be that headliner. Was there a piece of, hey, this is a good show, really well run. We, as the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds or the U.S. Navy Blue Angels, want to go to Duluth and want to do the Duluth Air Show, but now there isn't one this year, so we're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said. So as you build your show and as your show, I mean, the more you do the show, the better it can be,
Yep.
right? Because you learn from the year before how to improve every year. We are ever evolving.
Yep.
So even though we've done this 23 years, or I've done this 23 years, we still change things every year. There's
Sure.
still things we want to change to make it better. And I think I'm very open to feedback. Because I'm on the inside. I'm not seeing the public face. I mean, I'm not there.
Right.
I'm there, but I'm not there.
You're not driving a car, coming to the show,
Right.
right?
And there's nothing worse than bringing your kids to the Twin Cities, going to like a Wild game or a Vikings game. Where am I going to park? How am I going to? I mean, how long is it going to take to get in there? And
Right.
so, you try to think through that. But I think that there was something to be said. Is once I really understood the marketing aspect of what our armed forces need in terms of recruiting, retention, marketing, and really, really understanding that. And I've done two, what I'm going to call Navy. You'll love this because I know we've talked about this before. I have more carrier time at one point than you did.
Oh, for
right?
sure.
Yeah.
He likes to tell me.
You're in the Navy, right? And,
Yeah.
and I'm not, but yet I've already been on the Ronald Reagan for 5 days, and I've
Right.
already, catapulted off the Reagan and trapped on the Reagan.
He's got a hook certificate. I do
do,
not.
yep.
Let's just get, okay. Go
And
ahead.
so I've been very blessed, by the U.S. Navy also realizing that, hey, we want to educate you
Yeah.
more about the mission of the Navy and the Marine Corps.
Right.
And so by going to the, some of the programs that they offer that I was invited to attend, I've learned a lot. And I've seen, what the sailors do. I mean, I've been there. I've lived it now. And so I have a much better appreciation and understanding. So when we're doing our marketing and how we're positioning the show, there's a much bigger picture. There's a lot more going on, like
Right.
we say, than just entertainment.
Well, and I think too, from the Navy side, from other work I've done in uniform, the Duluth Airshow has looked at this really signature event. And more than once, we've built an entire Navy week around the Duluth Airshow with the Blue Angels. And that I don't think it's intentional this year, but you're expanding that envelope a little bit this year. I know one of the new things is sponsoring the movies in the park and Top Gun Maverick.
So the thing that I don't want to forget before I jump to that is
Yeah.
when we're talking about making sure that we can do what we need to do.
Yep.
For the last few years, Essentia Health is the presenting sponsor of the Duluth Airshow, and their involvement has really allowed us to take that next step. Right, there's an evolutionary step that you have to take so the show doesn't get stagnant. And when we moved to that every year model, when Tom gave us approval to do that, and then we kind of it shared that information with the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels and the Canadian Forces, Snowbirds.
Yep.
Like, look, we're going to try and track this on a yearly basis if we can find a way to do this.
Yeah.
We really, in order to do that, we needed to make sure that we had stability, and Essentia Health really provided us that stability by being a presenting partner and signing with us long term. To allow us to project out 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years
Sure.
in order to determine how we were going to get to that place that we needed to be. So the key is not only are we the largest air show in Minnesota, we are the largest air show in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, in that whole region. I would say Wisconsin, but nobody can compete with
Well,
Oshkosh.
you have to take Oshkosh.
You got to take Oshkosh out of it.
If you've been to Oshkosh, it's not comparable
Right.
to anything else. So.
And I think once we established that, right, then the awards started coming. The recognition started coming to the Duluth Air Show based on the way that we were doing things and our model and how we were doing it. But again, it was always an evolution, right? So when we figured something else, after doing it for 23 years, you'd hope you'd figure out quite a bit, right? And so what we noticed over the last 8 years is there was a change. The first, I'm going to say 15 years of the air show, we were winning marketing awards, right?
Okay.
But that was not work that we were doing, right?
Now, this is through ICAS, the International Convention of Air Shows, so kind of your peers.
Right. And so international body, right? They all around the world. And so we were winning marketing awards, but the marketing pieces were being designed locally by, at the time, it was H.T. Klatsky and Associates, and then Haley Sue, took on some of that. And then when that model switched and they were no longer doing marketing awards, it really then became innovation. And what is your show? What's the real show, right?
Yeah.
What are you really doing?
Yeah.
That's leading the industry. And I think that's really where we came up, and we started demonstrating that we are the leaders in 1 area, 2 area, 3 area, 4 areas, 5 areas, 6 areas. So we are the only air show in all of the world to win 6 consecutive Pinnacle Awards and recognition by the International Council of Air Shows. And I know you asked me something that I didn't answer.
I didn't, yeah.
And now we're probably
moved on,
past it.
yeah.
We did move past it.
One of the things that I want to make sure we get a chance to talk about is what it takes to put on the air show, both in terms of, you have the headliner, and I do think that it's helpful for folks to know it's just not a given that you're going to get the Blue Angels or the Thunderbirds every year. They get, tons of requests and have to pick what they can actually go to. And then you build out the rest of the show. So maybe talking a little bit about how that happens and what might be interested this year. And then I also want a chance just to talk about how many volunteers it takes to put on the air show.
Well, we can start with the volunteer component first. This year, I think we're I think I'm going to say about 1,500 volunteers.
Wow.
And
because it's more than just 2 days.
Yes. Right. And so, and this is just to talk quickly about the timeline. So the air show starts like any other event, right? They may start the week of the show. We don't. We have to start earlier than that.
Yeah.
And the reason we have to start a week and a half earlier than that is because Marge Swore and her team have to lay out for the U.S. Navy Blue Angels and or the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds a tarp.
Right.
And
this is fascinating, folks.
This is a crazy, and this would be like a great image to show this amazing tarp.
Yeah.
But the tarp is 5,000 feet long.
Yeah. Remember, a mile is about, 5,280?
Yeah, so it's almost a mile long. And it's this 3 millimeter white poly that has to be, and it only comes in sheets of like 300 feet.
Yeah.
So it's 300 by 20 is you get in the box. And you got to roll it out 3 millimeters, right? You got to weigh it down as you're going.
Yeah.
And then you got to not only roll it up, but then you got to fold it out to get your 20 feet. So you get 300 by 40, weighing it down. And you keep doing that all the way down to 5,000 feet.
Right.
Now, this process in 2001, first air show, took us 3 days to get down. 3 days, right? And it was nonstop. It was solid. These days, it takes us about a day.
Wow.
We figured out.
Know what they're doing.
We do. We got smart, right? Yeah. So now we order rolls. We now have tractors that roll it out. Okay. You know what I mean? Versus manual labor trying to unfold and do it. So we've gotten really smart and intelligent over the years to figure out what is the most. Again, not me. I didn't figure this out, right? Marge Swore said, "Hey, if we could do this on rolls, I could reduce our time by half."
Yeah.
Right. So then we found a way to do that.
Yeah.
And then she came back again and said, not only that, if we could find a way to do it with tractors and we could have rebar and sandbags located sporadically down this line, we could just
pump it.
Right. And so she has this tarp layout, and it's down to a science.
And again, folks, that's the center line. So when you're in the air, this is your orientation.
When you're flying 500 miles an hour, upside down, right? You need to know exactly where you're at looking down because the runway.
Oh, there's the line.
There's the line. And there's a center point marker there. And so, I mean, it's all for
something the audience doesn't see, but it's so important for the performers.
Right. You'll see overhead photos of the air show every now and then. Or if you take a helicopter ride during the air show, you'll see this massive tarp.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one of the things that a lot of folks don't know is the air show does something really unique in terms of all those volunteers and giving they get to financially participate in the air show as well. I'm not familiar. I mean, we have big events in Duluth that require lots of volunteers, but I'm not familiar with anyone else who does what the air show does.
So this is one of those awards that we got, right, from the International Council of Air Shows. We created an organization called, well, not an organization, but we created something called the Protected Group Fund. And I would encourage anyone, if you're interested in looking at it and seeing what it's all about, just go to the Duluth Airshow website, and we've got a whole video on what it is. But in a nutshell, we take a percentage of everything: ticket sales, parking sales, everything. We pool it all into one big pool. And then for those volunteer organizations, so you volunteer at the air show, but the air show is also making a donation to you in exchange for your volunteerism.
Yeah.
Right. So volunteer by nature is like, well, it's free. You're volunteering. Right. Yes, you are. But we also appreciate those organizations, and we, as a nonprofit ourselves, we also want to show love to them and appreciate them because it really is a community effort.
And the organization gets to go home with cash. And I mean, I know for some of them, it's their thing that they do, whether it's Boy Scouts or a church group, or it's their thing of the year where they really earn the revenue to support a lot of their own activities.
Right. Well, and you're talking about 62 different civic organizations, nonprofit groups. And the thing of note of that is that we are, I believe we are the sole source of funding for 12 of those organizations.
Okay.
So because we're on that yearly track of air shows, their only fundraiser, their only yearly income is getting everybody to work the Duluth Air Show for 3 days.
Sure.
And when we make the donation to that organization, that sustains them for the year.
So probably also helpful going to the annual that those groups could, like, hey, we're doing the air show. That's how we're going to generate revenue. And when it was every year, they can just build that in.
Plan for it. Now, our dates may change, from year to year. I mean, we've been pretty consistent with the third weekend of July.
Yeah.
But as you and I both know, we've done the air show in May. We've
September.
done it in June. It's September. So we try to avoid September now if we can. But, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, some of our best air show weather, believe it or not, has been in May.
Yeah.
Well,
and weather is always interesting. I remember a show where, again, the audience at home may not realize that the headliner performers have low shows and high shows
and flat
shows, all depending on what the ceiling, the cloud layer is like that day. And my dad, who loves the air show, had come, and it was classic Duluth summer weather. It was foggy. Didn't know what was going to happen that day. And then at like 10:30, everything opened up, and it was blue sky, high show. I can't remember if it was the Blues that year or not. But how do you personally? That's always got to be a little bit of you have the dates picked based on your key performers, and then it's day of, and and the weather forecast looks terrible, and your phone, I'm sure, is ringing off the hook, or your email is blowing up, and how do you navigate the stress and pressure that comes with, even though you've done it many times, it still has to be real.
Well, I mean, I think you always try to build in contingency plans. You can only do so much, and so I've learned, again, things that you learn along the way. I learned long ago, don't stress out about the things you can't control. Just stress out about the things you can.
Okay.
Right. And so the one thing I really, we have
weather plans. Stress about everything.
Well, right. And so my whole mentality is I handle stress really well. I mean, it's life.
Yeah.
It is what it is, right? Mm-hmm. And so you do the best that you can, but you have your contingency plans. John Carlson in our office wears his rain hat religiously to the air show. So, and John used to be at Grandma's Marathon, and so he always wears his hat. And as long as he's wearing his hat, it's not going to rain that particular day. So. It was comical because I think last year John wore his hat to the Duluth October Festival, which we also do, but he forgot to wear it and it rained. So I'm like, I believe in the hat.
It's true.
Ironically, after 23 years, he's demonstrated the hat works. So John will be wearing his hat this year, and when he wears a hat, if I was my daughter Reagan right now, I'd say it's not going to rain. Knock on wood, Dad. Knock on wood. So she's like really superstitious. I'm not. But you build in plans, and the thing we know about Duluth is the weather changes on a dime here.
Right.
And so there has never, in 23 years, there has never been an air show where we were not able to do something.
Right.
I think we're talking 2017. You and I were there. It was raining on that Saturday. But we got stuff in there. It was foggy. It was overcast.
Yes.
It was miserable.
Yeah.
But we still got things in the air. We had the Coast Guard do their SAR demo. We had the Shockwave jet truck also do its performance on the ground. We had that thing run 4 times versus only 2.
Yeah.
And then Sunday was beautiful and magical.
Right.
And so we invited everybody that was there Saturday. Hey, come back tomorrow. Sunday, no cost.
Right.
It's supposed to be sunny tomorrow. So there's things that you can do to mitigate it. But there's also things that, again, we are an air and aviation expo.
Right.
So we have 2 things, right? We've got the ground displays, we've got the educational exhibits. So there is plenty to do on the ground.
Right.
The flying is contingent on visibility.
Right.
Right. And so there's no guarantee ever that things are, that we're going to fly all day. I mean, that's the hope, but there's tons to do on the ground. So no matter what the weather is, you still come out, you still enjoy it.
Yep.
Because we've had air shows like you're just talking about. We've had 4 different seasons in one day.
Right.
At many air shows over the years, where fog, low visibility, then it was like 90 degrees
and hot and humid.
And people were having heat stroke, but the morning it was 58.
Right.
And then by the time we're done at the end of the day, it's 60 and sideways rain again, but we got the show in.
Yeah.
So the whole thing was
there's
there.
There's always something to do.
Right,
so,
absolutely.
As you look back, what's a highlight? Is there a favorite show? I mean, I know that's like picking a favorite child, but is there anything that stands out in terms of a performance?
Well, I think you always go back to your first, right? It's the magic and the awe of being at your first event. When your first, you put all your blood, your sweat, your tears, your money,
the first thing flying had to have been amazing.
It was,
oh my gosh, we're doing this.
And I remember I was on the ramp with Stephanie, our good friend Stephanie LaFleur, and I was just I could feel the tension, right? Because there was low cloud ceilings that day.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, I just lost my home. And I remember thinking that. I mean, I remember having that moment where I was like ready to break down and like have an emotional whatever. And Stephanie was like, "It's going to be fine. This is going to, it's going to work. The weather's the low is supposed to burn off. The cloud's supposed to burn off. The fog's supposed to be burning off." And I remember we're going to start flying that day at 11 o'clock. But from the time we got there at 5 in the morning till about 10:45, I'm sure you remember this, the Red Barons were the first act out.
Okay.
And we had the flag jumpers come in, and the Red Barons circled them.
Yeah.
And I remember it was broken, scattered, And as the parachutist was coming down, it started to get clearer and clearer and clearer. It was a whirlwind of emotion for me that day, because it was the first, and I thought I had lost everything, only to have it be, faith
Very
and
successful.
positivity. Yeah, and so that's the one I remember.
All right. What are you excited about this year? And the dates are?
So July 15th and 16th.
Tickets are still available.
Yeah. Well, premium seat. So Saturdays always, and here's what I always want to tell everybody: if you're a local,
go Sunday.
go Sunday.
Yep.
Roger and I will beat this into the ground.
If you live here, go Sunday.
If you live here, go Sunday. Do not go Saturday.
Yeah. And Saturday attendance tends to run 2 to 1 over
It's
Sunday.
2 to 1,
Yeah.
right? And people get frustrated sometimes on Saturday, because right now you can't even buy an orange parking lot pass for Saturday. You can't even buy a flight line seat for Saturday. Those have been sold out for over a month.
Sure.
There's still some presidential chalet tickets left for Saturday.
Yeah.
But the thing I always come back to is you're going to wait in line. So this year we've never done this before. We are the heavy air show this year. KC-46 tanker, C-130, B-1 Lancer bomber we've not had here ever.
Okay.
I'm super excited to see that. And I know I'm missing something else. C-17, KC-130. I mean, they're all here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like our ramp. Ethan Alt, our ground ops director with Dave Blazvik, they put together this ramp, and it is tight. It is really tight. But we did that intentionally because, first of all, there's no shade on the grounds of the airport. And by having heavy aircraft there, you can get under the wings and you can get some shade.
Right.
But the other thing is that we notice is that lines to tour these aircraft
are always
long.
Yep.
I mean, it would take you 45 minutes to get into one
I think
aircraft.
people love being able to walk through an aircraft
Yeah.
and sort of feel the immensity of that.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And so by having more of those heavy aircraft, we can give people more variety.
Yep.
We can provide more shade. But the downside of that is we've also taken up a lot of the ramp space for sitting and viewing, because now you got these massive aircraft.
Sure.
And so Saturday this year is probably going to be a little tight.
Packed.
It's going to be tight. Sunday, it's going to be, there's a lot more, room to move around, and I would encourage anybody, go Sunday if you can.
If you're local, go Sunday.
Absolutely.
Before we end, let's come back to a question I asked earlier that we didn't answer, but like you've taken on the movies in the park this year. It's going to be Top Gun Maverick. I hear Maverick's coming.
Maverick will be here. We're excited. Honestly, we're excited. When we were at the International Council of Air Shows convention this year, I had a chance to meet him. He was there. I remember walking in, I'm like, wow, ICAST brought Tom Cruise in for this convention this year. I was like in awe. I mean, like, this is so cool. This is like the coolest thing ever. I was waiting to get pictures and selfies and stuff like that. And then it was a buzz. Tom Cruise is here this year. What the? Tom Cruise?
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
So I remember going and I remember seeing him, and I'm like, started walking until I got up to him, and I'm like, this is legitimately Tom Cruise from 1984, 85. When Top Gun came out.
Yeah.
And he is a Tom Cruise impersonator, but he is Maverick. I mean, he legitimately looks like him, talks like him, moves like him, acts like him, same height, same teeth, same everything. It is crazy, and he's Canadian, eh?
Okay.
So he does a really good job of his gig, and is like great gig for him.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you, you will not. You cannot tell the difference.
Okay.
I mean, I legitimately felt I was talking to Tom Cruise.
Okay.
But he's Maverick, right? And so he's got the persona, he's got the swagger, he's got the naval aviator thing going on, and so he's going to be. Oh, I mean, do you have this naval aviator? But he's going to be at Movies in the Park, and this is something new, and we'll get through it really quickly. We've never done this. When we were working with NAVCO, you and I know what NAVCO is.
Yep. Native community outreach.
Yes. So they wanted to try and do some more outreach in Duluth, and so we thought, instead of doing our welcome reception, which is kind of a private thing, let's do something that's going to invite all of the public to come out to Movies in the Park on Friday, July 14th. We're going to have all the performers there. The U.S. Navy Blue Angels will be there. We're going to have everybody, and it's open to the public. And we're going to start. I think Movies in the Park starts at 9. We're going to start at like 7, 7:30. So we want all the public to come out to Movies in the Park early. Find your spot, because you're also going to get a chance to meet the performers,
right?
The U.S. Navy Blue Angels, the pilots.
Yep.
The key in this whole thing is Lieutenant Amanda Lee from Mounds View, Minnesota.
Right.
Went to college at UMD right here in Duluth.
Right.
And so Amanda is the first female.
The first female, right?
First female pilot to ever fly with the Blue Angels. We're excited to have her. So you're going to get a chance to meet her.
Minnesota native, Bulldog.
All the stuff,
Nice.
all the stuff. And this is a huge marketing thing for us, and she's so excited to get back. But coming back to Tom Cruise, or the Maverick guy we've got coming, he'll be there. So this is going to be your chance to bring your kids out.
Yep.
Not only can you meet Maverick, it's free.
Yep.
Get your picture taken with them, and then watch them on the big screen.
Yeah, so that's Friday, July 14th. Airshow then is Saturday the 15th. Again, if you're local, go on Sunday the 16th. Tickets, if someone wants to go, they don't have their tickets yet, what's their best course of action?
Well, again, DuluthAirshow.com was what I would recommend. Now, if you want to save some money, I would strongly encourage people to go to Menards.
Okay.
Menards has the cheapest general admission tickets that you can buy, and there's no ticketing fees.
Got it.
So really, we tell everybody when they call the office, how can I get discounted tickets? Go to Menards.
Got it.
Simple. Go to Menards. You're going to save yourself a bunch of money on the general admission stuff.
All right. Well, thank you, Ryan Kern, president and founder of the Duluth Airshow, amongst many other activities. Maybe we'll talk about that another time, but thanks for being with us today.
No, I appreciate it. This was fun.
All right. Thanks for joining us today. You've been listening to Good Talk. I'm your host, Roger Reiner, and we look forward to having you with us for our next conversation.